that's great. And you're thinking about some of the other drivers out there, Jensen. We'll touch upon these again in follow-up episodes, but there's such changes in regulations and standards. We've talked about the SBOM, but wider than that, we've got regulations coming in, things like WP29R155 and new ISO standards. We've got new data protection laws in China. We've got this consistently increasing attack surface that we've kind of touched upon today as well. I think one of the interesting things for the listeners, and I guess I'll put you both on the spot with this, but is what are some of the common unknown unknowns that people are suffering when we go into clients and we tell them about their problems? Are there common kind of unknown unknowns that we see?
Do you like to go first, Chris, or?
Sure. Look, I think we talked a little bit about the gaps in knowledge of the software that they are, potentially supplying, and those gaps can come in a few forms. So essentially what I'm talking about is there's part of the software that's either supplied or to a customer through the supply chain or to a consumer that is not known to the security team or research team. And so that can manifest itself in a number of ways, and it's something that we find fairly often. One is that the tools that they're using or the methodology that they're using doesn't understand some of the file formats, and so some of the software is hidden behind a file format that's not recognized by the tools or methodology. And another one is that there's code for architectures that are not necessary, that are kind of overlooked, where the hardware is quite complex. There could be some kind of firmware which essentially is like a file format, but where code is kind of hidden behind that, or any kind of file system, or there just could be omissions because they're looking at the software picture from a very source code perspective, where they're building up their bill of materials or their understanding of the software composition based on source code, but they have things like package managers or third-party components that are coming in that they don't have visibility on. And so to me, where you're not even aware that you have software on your system that's running, that's an unknown, right? And that's quite a, depending on what you find when you start to do the kind of discovery that we do, you can have some nasty surprises there.
Brilliant. Yeah, great answer under pressure there, Chris. That was awesome. Adam, any additional thoughts about that?
So just thinking in terms of what we've seen in practice, really. So some examples being sort of the electronic control units on vehicles. I remember when we started, looking at them sort of 5 years ago, right? These formats, although they may be sort of widely used in automotive, they're not generally available. You can't get access to these file formats off the internet or detailed documentation. So you have to remember a lot with the embedded systems, that the file formats are in many ways legacy, but they've been kept on. And you do see this even in the case of what we've seen with even maps, for example, navigational data for vehicles as well, where you see file formats which have been modified and pretty much butchered over the course of 2 decades. And the reason why that adds a complexity to this, because you'd like to think that to put together an SBOM that you could hopefully pull some tool off the internet and just enumerate these or provide file listings. But this is where it gets really complex, and hopefully something we'll drill down in future podcasts, is that many of them are could be the file systems in the case of, say, ECU images like braking controllers and near field sensing units. There's nothing on the internet which is going to handle them. There's no general tools, there's no freeware tools, there's no open source software tools, certainly not we've never come across. And therefore being able to produce the SBOM and have those assurances is impossible. And even from almost a perspective, and I think this is true of many of the OEMs as well, this software can often be packaged, but it doesn't mean that they've got general tools to extract them again and do all the analysis. So it does require, for certainly legacy systems, certainly for embedded systems, that this custom support and that work does need to be performed. Otherwise, this is where you end up with the essentially the known unknowns. You don't know what to do with them; you just know they exist,
Mhm.
and who is going to provide the support for that? Especially if it may have been a file format that you dropped a few years ago, or it's just being modified again. So there is a real depth of complexity in this, and this management piece, the software bill of materials, and the management of it. It's quite easy to at first sort of gloss over the fact, but the management really comes into having support for everything.
Yeah.
So it is a very overwhelming task, and that's what I was saying. On the face of the SBOM, it may appear that it's sort of straightforward ask at first, but this is where the complexity comes into it on the practical piece of producing that inventory.
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah, great answer. So, I mean, that's great, Jens. One of the other questions I think we have is thinking about the future and what the future looks like. And we've seen crazy change and evolution of embedded systems, their use, their complexity. I know we could do an entire probably series on the future look of embedded security, but a couple of thoughts from yourself first, Chris. How do you think the future looks, and maybe what are your concerns, or what should people be getting concerned about?
Yeah, look, I think some of what the future looks like you can read in the new regulations coming out of UNECI, like the WP 29, R155, R156, which is really focused on ensuring that you have a robust cybersecurity management process or to do cybersecurity assurance, and then assuring that once you've delivered your product, in this case an automobile, that is still managed and that you're able to update software on the vehicle to maintain the posture. And so if you look at, I mean, that is not the reality today. In some companies are obviously doing better than others, but that really is, if you look at where the regulations are driving things, that's where the future is. And I think that mimics what we see in the desktop world. And the reason I think that embedded systems are a little bit behind where the desktop world is, or your mobile phone that's getting updates potentially multiple times a week or more than once a day, is just because of the access in the past has been more niche. But I think the criticality of those systems and some of the attacks we've seen recently is changing that, because there's more at stake. And so people are getting over the fact that they're less accessible, those systems, and it's a little bit harder to get to actually plan an attack than if the server's just sitting there and you just have to sit in your basement, attacking that network, because you can do more damage. And so I think that's what's driving the things like the executive order is this the criticality of those systems and the gains potentially to be had by attacking them, even though they're a little bit less accessible. So unfortunately, that's the reality, and the industry, not just automotive, obviously, but almost every industry needs to start responding to that.
Yeah, yeah, great. And Adam, your thoughts about the future and how it looks?
So I think firstly, this is a positive start, right? This has been a long time coming, so it's been brilliant that the various agencies and industry have come together and all provided input and worked on practical solutions for in interchangeable formats as well for how SBOM can work in the industry. But recognize that it is just a first step. It is by no means perfect. It is not a silver bullet. And credit to the actual SBOM executive order. Of course, it states that as well. But recognize the benefits in this and what you can do with an inventory. So where Chris quite rightly mentions WP29 R155 and R156, and we think about ISO standard 21434. The inventory, a software inventory, depending on the context you want to use it in, will serve that benefit for all other standards, all other quality assurances. We sort of really consider it a foundation to get many of the requirements done for R155, because you understand the components you have. You start to get control of that. Imagine trying to meet non-functional requirements or various software security requirements when you don't know what you have. It's somewhat a bit of an oxymoron, right? So you just need to sort of step back for a moment and recognize all the benefits of saying, oh, well, with this, we can do all this stuff.
Mhm.
Even as far as decisions around careers and pen testing, because when you look at that data, you can start to look at what expertise do we need, what software have we seen, and the components coming in from the software supply chain that we maybe didn't know about before. How could we drive assurances around pen testing? Oh, well, they need to have expertise in embedded and familiar with SQLite database and familiar with the Bluetooth libraries, because you can start to see some functional behavior in there as well. So, often with these things, I think people think, oh my God, I've got a million other things to do. I need to invest huge amounts of money into this. But recognize that when it's done properly and you're using automation, that it's actually going to make things much easier across the board, and recognize all the places you can use it. And it is vast in terms of the benefits of this as well. So in terms of the future, things are just getting started here with the SBOM. I would barely say we're scratching the surface, but it is a very positive step. And then, in terms of things that we're going to see that need to be addressed are things like the digital bill of materials. And hopefully we'll go into that in future podcasts as well, around attestation of an SBOM record. Who signed it and when? How up to date is it? Bearing in mind that everyone will be familiar, the day you deliver a software package, essentially that SBOM record, depending what is in there, may be out of date, especially say in the case of if you did deliver CVE information, which isn't a requirement yet of the executive order. But bear in mind, these things change almost immediately, so the assurances can change. So attestation is going to be a big part of this, and I imagine this sort of central register, if you like, that we can start to look up all this information from all different aspects to help lighten the load on the software supply chain. This thing should not be a burdensome, expensive task for businesses to take on. So there are going to be technologies and capabilities, and sharing and information sharing is a big aspect in the executive order to help companies actually get grips of this quicker as well.